Mr. Samir Modi, who is the President of the Confederation of Asia-Pacific Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Before he gives the welcome remarks, let me welcome all of you to this conference. Mr. Modi has a very distinguished background. He, besides being the President of the CACCI, he is also in the consumer goods business. He has graduated from the US and specializes in cosmetic products, and he has led the chamber for the last 2 years. And his foundation in 1996 aimed to prevent the spread of HIV/AIDS in India and won the President's Award for the exceptional work in gender-related issues in India. So he will be giving the welcome address. I will just give a brief on the speakers. The first speaker, there's also the opening remarks by the Secretary General of the International Cooperation and Development Fund, Ambassador Timothy Siam. He is the Secretary General of Icdf, and during his tenure as Section Chief and Deputy Director General of the Department of Economics and Trade Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he worked in the legalization of Taiwan's foreign aid work, including Taiwan's International Cooperation and Development Act and MOFA's white paper on foreign aid policy. He was also the program director of the APEC Secretariat and Taiwan's ambassador to the Republic of Nauru. He will give the welcome address as well, opening remarks, and his global reach has involved him in various areas covering education, medicine, clean energy, horticulture, and livestock farming. Our next speaker is Alex Shi. Alex is Deputy Secretary General of the Icdf. He has experience as Secretary to the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and he's been the Project Manager of International Economic Cooperation and Development Fund of ADB's internship program. He's also the Board Director of Skopje Export Processing Zone and Bonham Company in the Republic of Macedonia. His specialties include international cooperation program appraisal, implementation and management, outbound investment, international marketing, and auditing. We next have the speaker, Robert Cradle. Robert is the Managing Director and Chief Investment Officer of Impact Investment Exchange based in Singapore. He is in charge of portfolio management and is the Chief Investment Officer of this company. And he leads all of the company's portfolio management activities and led the effort to launch the first women's livelihood bond as well as a 100 million women's livelihood bond. He's also a member of the foundation as well as of a number of IXS, which involves Green Enterprises, which is an ethical organic virgin coconut oil producer in Aceh, Indonesia. And also he has involvement in a peer-to-peer solar energy sharing company operating in Bangladesh. He received his BA from Princeton University, summa cum laude, and he's also got a JD from the University of Pennsylvania. He has lectured on management as a young professor at the Singapore Management University. We were supposed to have another person who unfortunately has been called off because he has something interesting happening in his family, and in his place we have Mr. Suri Katpalia, who will be talking about the beyond COVID-19 crisis. And he has been the former MD of Standard & Poor. And we have from the chamber representation a very senior person with 25 years of experience dealing with the government, the private sector, and SMEs, Ms. Jyoti Vij. And we're very pleased that she is here to share her experience with how the Chambers of Commerce work in this particular direction. So without further ado, let me invite Mr. Modi, CACCI President, to give the welcome remarks. Mr. Modi, please.
Thank you, Mr. Abraham, esteemed guests, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. A pleasant day to one and all, and it is an absolute honor and pleasure that I welcome everyone today to the most important webinar conducted for the benefit of the backbone of Asian economy, our small and medium enterprises. With a network of 27 national chambers of commerce and industry in 25 countries and independent economies in Asia, the Confederation of Asia Pacific Chambers of Commerce, widely known as CACCI, provide a platform for businesses in the region to network and explore possible areas of cooperation, increasing interaction and promoting growth in doing so. It maintains ties and exchange of dialogue and information with other international organizations in and out of the region, with TaiwanICDF being one of its strategic partners. CACCI and TaiwanICDF both push forth the growth of sustainable development and recognize the important role of SMEs play in realizing such an agenda. According to the UN Conference on Trade and Development, SMEs account for 2/3 of global employment and between 80 to 90% of employment in low-income countries. In Asia-Pacific economies alone, they account for over 97% of all businesses and employ over half of the workforce. As such, SMEs are crucial to the economic growth of both developed and developing nations. The constituent of most of CACCI members' chambers are SMEs, and as a result, one of Confederation's focuses is on SME development. Towards this end, CACCI has established the SME Development Council, headed by a highly capable moderator, Mr. George Abraham from Singapore, to provide a platform for our members to regularly come together and discuss possible areas of cooperation to promote the development of SMEs in the region. CACCI believes in bringing SMEs into the mainstream of economic development. However, because of their size, SMEs face limitations that make them less resilient to risk and prevent them from attaining economies of scale. These limitations are particularly significant in the areas of human resource development, technological capability, and access to financing and information. Over the past year, SMEs have been disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus crisis. While COVID-19 had devastating effects across all industries, SMEs were among the hardest hit, especially lockdowns and border restrictions. And with the pandemic continuously raging on across the region, many are struggling to stay afloat. Now more than ever, SMEs need enhanced support, not only to reduce, if not eliminate, their limitations, but to build back better and allow them to be competitive both domestically and internationally post-pandemic. With today's webinar, CACCI and TaiwanICDF aim to help SMEs adapt practical yet innovative strategies for the post-COVID world. In presenting 3 layers of strategies from the perspective of regional policy, development assistance, and businesses, the hope is to provide well-rounded solutions and foster a strong environment for SME recovery. Before I conclude, I would like to thank TaiwanICDF not only for working with us on this event, but for their dedication in boosting socio-economic development and in supporting small and medium businesses. Partnering such a noble organization is always a privilege and a pleasure for CACCI. I also extend my appreciation to our esteemed and expert panelists from the Asian Development Bank, TaiwanICDF, Impact Investment Exchange Singapore, and of course CACCI, for what will no doubt be the most informative and fruitful panel discussion. Thank you all, and I wish you a great conference and good day.
Mr. Modi, thank you very much for your remarks. I would now like to invite Mr. Timothy Siam, Secretary General of TaiwanICDF, to make his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Abraham, for your introduction earlier. President Modi, dear panelists, friends, and colleagues from around the world, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. On behalf of the TaiwanICDF, it is a pleasure to welcome you all to the 2021 United Nations High-Level Political Forum side event webinar on adaptation of SMEs with innovative and pragmatic strategies in the new normal. First of all, I would like to thank CACCI for co-hosting this side event with us today. Last year, TaiwanICDF and CACCI announced our joint statement on the application of science, technology, and innovation through public-private partnership to achieve sustainable development during the high-level political forum. This year, we are advancing our cooperation and building a platform to increase dialogue with multiple stakeholders throughout the regional communities and create greater impacts on the development of small and medium-sized enterprises in the Asia-Pacific region in the post-COVID-19 era. In Taiwan, more than 97% of enterprises are small and medium-sized. Their sales have continued to increase over the years and accounted for more than $400 billion in 2019, which is almost 70% of our GDP. SMEs are clearly the backbone of Taiwan's economy. As the country's official aid agency, TaiwanICDF is dedicated to sharing our lessons learned with the global community. Drawing upon our development comparative advantages, we leverage on our expertise in agriculture, public health, ICT, environment, as well as SMEs to assist our allied and partner countries. We integrate innovative technology, skills, applications, and methodologies to develop new projects and collaborate with new partners in line with SDGs and widen project impacts and effects. With the COVID-19 pandemic posing a significant threat to the world, we need to respond to these challenges with faster, smarter solutions, and partnership and collaboration are the keys to success. With this in mind, I'm glad to say that we are making much progress this year with our partners to improve the abilities of developing countries to combat and build resilience against the pandemic. I believe the key to successfully do this is by creating a foundation that can unlock the full potential of the SMEs, the true economic drivers in many developing nations. And when it comes to small and medium-sized enterprises, we cannot ignore the role of women entrepreneurs in the region. While Asian women have made considerable gains in education, this has not been translated sufficiently to employment and entrepreneurship opportunities. And the women-owned small and medium enterprises are often smaller in scale, scope, and profits than those owned by men. However, we are planning to make big changes in these areas with our partners, Impact Investment Exchange. IX is a key practitioner in impact investments and sustainability, especially for women. It is focusing on gender equality issues and using innovative financial instruments to mobilize large-scale private investments to drive women's economic empowerment across multiple SDGs in South and Southeast Asia. Like UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said at the General Assembly on June 28, 2020, the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic are falling disproportionately on the most vulnerable, people living in poverty, the working, poor, women and children, persons with disabilities, and other marginalized groups. This cannot be true in Asia, especially for the SMEs and the many home-based business owned by women. As the official aid agency of Taiwan, together with our like-minded partners like CACCI and IX, we must rise to the challenge and come together to find better solutions to help the communities in need. Through this virtual side event, we are already taking the first step by coming together to share and work together. Likewise, I have already started to collaborate with each other, and I believe we will continue to explore and expand our partnership with better synergy and effectiveness. There is an old saying, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Taiwan and the TaiwanICDF are committed to assisting our partner countries in economic recovery and sustainable development in the COVID-19 era and beyond. With that, I would like to wish all of us good success in the high-level political forum SETI event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Siam. That was a very good overview of what this whole seminar is about. But as the moderator, I have to give a brief introduction, and I would like to talk about the most important aspect, which is how the pandemic has affected businesses as a whole, and more importantly, how this seminar tries to give an idea of how. I'm sorry, I seem to be getting an echo. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Are you able to?
Yes, we can hear you
hear?
clearly.
Yeah. Sorry. There was an echo, and very quickly, if I may, just explain what the whole purpose of the seminar is. It is for an adaptation of SMEs and the innovation that they can do in order to cope with the effects of the pandemic. At the first level, from the regional level, we will hear how policies have been implemented to support SMEs in their recovery. And secondly, from the ODA perspective, the best practices that have catalyzed cross-sector resources for SMEs development. And finally, on the business aspect, the practical approaches that chambers of commerce and business have rapidly adapted throughout the pandemic. The first speaker who will talk about these would be Mr. Suri Katpalia, who, as I introduced earlier, is a specialist with experience in this area, and he's a former MD of Standard & Poor. May I invite Mr. Suri, please, to make his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Abraham, for the introduction. First of all, good evening. Warm welcome to all of you again. I want to thank the organizers, APAC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, ICDF. We've already heard that SMEs are the backbone of Taiwan. It's not unique to Taiwan. I think SMEs are the backbone across Asia Pacific. The ballpark number that I used to often quote is that I think SMEs represent most economies in the region, roughly 70% of each economy. So they are the backbone. They need to be supported. They need to be stimulated. And we all know that they have been hurt quite badly in 2020, and it's continuing in 2021. Now, I've got 4 broad areas to talk about in terms of policies. And if we can move to the next slide, I will talk about the first one. So vaccinations are key to helping stabilize the environment, make it safe, and enable businesses and people to resume some kind of normalcy. Whether we go back to the way we were, or it's a very different world, I think that's up for debate, but I think that's not what we are here to talk about today. What we do know is that governments must vaccinate people aggressively. The data is already showing that wherever vaccinations have taken place, they have enabled people to be protected from hospitalization and serious medical bills. We have seen that countries that have focused and aggressively vaccinated their people are already having some kind of normalcy. So you look at the US, you look at the UK, which has announced some relaxations. You look at the Chinese economy, they're all benefiting from that. Small cities like small city states, and I shouldn't say small cities, Singapore and Hong Kong are large cities, they have done well too. And so vaccination is going to be the key to enabling the environment to be conducive for the growth of SMEs. The next slide. Whenever an SME in any part of the region collapses or goes bankrupt, it highlights the flaws in our financial system. It highlights flaws in our banking system. And therefore, it's important that banks and regulators, bankers, regulators, policymakers support SMEs through a variety of ways, be it credit support, be it through some kind of impact investment, be it through, as we have seen in Singapore, rental support for SMEs, support for subsidies towards employment of local people, because all of that is critical to keep the economy going. Now, it's easier said than done when you ask for bankers to exercise forbearance and for credit support, because these bills are hefty, and at the end of the day, the cost is usually borne by governments. And governments, not all governments in the region have deep pockets. Many are still struggling, and I won't name names here, but I think those examples are obvious. But I think it's important that governments have policies in place where finance to SMEs is not choked, because this is their greatest hour of need, and we need to support SMEs through credit and finance. The third area is in the area of trade promotion. It's on the next slide, please. So if you see the darker green areas on this world map, these are areas showing where activity has already somewhat rebounded after the shock of COVID-19. Now, for most of Asia Pacific, in a lot of cases, domestic markets, the demand has dried up. We've also seen supply chains fractured. But COVID has also provided opportunities for SMEs to go cross-border, particularly in the area of e-commerce and healthcare products. Now, one of the things that chambers of commerce across the region and other industry associations, other trade associations could do is help SMEs with targeted support and trade promotion to enable them to seize the opportunities in this pandemic, so that they have a lifeline, they provide employment and growth. The next area where policies are going to be critical, and it's on the next slide, is the whole area of technology adoption. I think we need to see digitization take place aggressively. For digitization to take place quickly, governments must have policies that provide support to SMEs to enable them to go digital. You need cyber security policies to ensure that it's a safe place, because one of the things we have seen is we've seen a fair amount of hacking, particularly in the Western world, but that remains a huge risk. And enabling SMEs to get connected with each other in the Western world. Another area is how can SMEs in this region move from cash to cashless? So what can governments do to ensure that this transition takes place through this environment to go cashless? There are still a number of economies in the region which are overly cash dependent, so this could help. Where governments can have policies is to see how can they build capability, how can they build capacity in this area of technology and technology support, because it will enable businesses and SMEs to maintain this growth momentum that they can achieve through technology even in a post-COVID world. In closing, in my last slide, which is the next one, we all know markets are cyclical, economies are cyclical, there is a big debate out there whether what is happening now is that cyclical or structural. Whatever it is, we need to have policies that ensure that SMEs have support to enable them not just see through this downturn, but the next downturn that may take place. Now, how can we do that? I think it's quite simple. You need to formalize all of the policies of support. You need to ensure that you have data and you have built-in systems and databases so that you are able to have data and see how various events, external impact SMEs and businesses so that you can provide them support. I think there is going to be a huge role for industry associations, not just through this current period, but also going forward. And then finally, I think there is room for SMEs to benefit from credit guarantee schemes because even 10 years back, the biggest challenge for SMEs was having access to finance through schemes such as this will help. So those are my comments. Happy to take any questions at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Suri. You have covered some very important ground. If I may just quickly summarize, you talked about the importance of vaccinations, the need for government financial support. You talked about the importance of trade promotion by governments and the private sector working hand in hand. You talked about the importance of IT adoption and how SMEs can become more cashless, which is quite a big problem in many of the Asian countries, including the ASEAN countries. You also talked about how governments can build capabilities to support the SMEs and the businesses. And of course, the preparation for the future, which involves the formalization of policy support, data to support the SMEs, and a role for industry associations, which Jyoti, our coming speaker, would address from the private sector viewpoint. Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions for you. So I hope I have summarized the key points that you have made.
Thank you. That was very well summarized. Thank you, Mr. Abraham.
So may I now move on to our next speaker. He is Mr. Alex Shi, Deputy Secretary General of the TaiwanICDF. Mr. Shi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. George Abraham, for your introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Shi, the Deputy Secretary General of the TaiwanICDF. Today, I would like to share how the TaiwanICDF as an ODA agency catalyze cross-sector resources for small and medium enterprises development. The TaiwanICDF plays a key role in Taiwan's official development aid. We are dedicated to boosting socio-economic development, enhancing human resources, and promoting economic relations with partner countries through human capital development, financial services, and technology transfer. Our main organizational strategies include drawing on Taiwan's comparative development advantages, responding to partner countries' needs and the international development trends, integrating public and private sector resources, as well as strengthening cooperative relationships through bilateral and multilateral means. Based on Taiwan's leading expertise and values, TaiwanICDF projects focus on 6 co-prioritized areas of operations, including agriculture, public health, ICT, environment, education, and small and medium enterprise development. To fulfill our mission, these areas of operation are carried out by our departments of technical cooperation, humanitarian assistance, international education and training, lending and investment, and research, development, and evaluation. Next page. The TaiwanICDF's headquarters is located in Taipei, and currently we have 96 ongoing projects in 37 countries over the world. We have 22 technical missions and around 250 professionals stationed in the field since 2015. we've aligned the TaiwanICDF organizational strategy with SDGs to pursue sustainable impacts together with our partners. A key operational differentiation between the TaiwanICDF and other 8 organizations is we dispatch long-term country-based professional technical teams in the field. This type of operation is very helpful in building stronger harmonized networks and aligning relationships with relevant government agencies and local stakeholders, identifying and responding to local needs more precisely and promptly, streamlining the project cycle for quicker transition between project phases, as well as more efficiently integrating international expertise with local knowledge and practice. In the past 1.5 years, the COVID-19 has disrupted the world's development and slowed or even reversed progress on sustainable development, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. The pandemic has impacted 829 million informal workers and increased unemployment by around 15 million. These informal SMEs are at significant risk due to the economic lockdown from the COVID-19 outbreak. As for consequence on the supply side of SMEs, it has caused reductions in the supply of labor and the disruptions in supply chains. In addition, lack of digitalization and technology is exacerbating the impact on SMEs. From the demand side, daily consumptions and household spending are constrained by declining incomes with revenue losses increasing. Even worse is from the financial side. Not only additional funds are needed to combat the pandemic, the financial credit and loans have lower confidence in the SME sector. To make the matter worse, the SMEs are finding it hard to survive because of the smaller cash buffers and the threatening bankruptcy. Next, please. Official development aid is defined as government aid designed to promote the economic development and the welfare of developing countries. Following this obligation, TaiwanICDF is building capacity for better resilience by facilitating innovation, introducing digitalization, and using new technology. We are also providing sustainable financing support with loans and credit guarantee and supporting accountable emergency response to partner countries to create synergy by joint effort with NGOs and humanitarian grants from urgent needs. However, ODA not only fulfill almost of the needs towards sustainable development, we also take one of the responsibility for catalyzing investment and leveraging contributions from public, private, and individual sectors. Next, please. For SME development, the TaiwanICDF is promoting inclusive, resilient, and sustainable industrialization and fostering innovation to attract multiple resources. We continue implementing training program in digital transformation, innovation applications, and the marketing and production. We're also building supporting environment for strengthening value chain and increasing access to financial services for underserved communities and assisting partner countries in rapid response by facilitating resilience to unknown challenges. Here are cases I would like to share with you. Next, please. First one is about online seminars and workshops. The TaiwanICDF continues to deliver our training program for SME development even in these very tough times. We just completed the 2021 webinar on digital innovation application of enterprises in last month, where we invited experts to share the Taiwan's government's policies and practice for guiding enterprises digital transformation and introduce innovative applications of digital technology. Among these topics, crowdfunding, a relatively new business and marketing model, was the most interesting one to the participants. In Taiwan, crowdfunding has attracted cumulatively more than $100 million from almost 3,000 successful projects between 2012 to 2019. We invited the founder of Flying V, one of the most popular crowdfunding platforms in Taiwan, to share his experience in designing and marketing a successful project. Next, please. Secondly, responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, our technical mission in Indonesia has linked production and marketing through assisting local farmers to register as a farmer organization and participate in the operation of packing house, which is built by the Strengthening Incubator Agribusiness with Human Development Project in Indonesia. Due to the severe pandemic, the operation of packing house is complies with hygiene regulations, not only strengthening the workers' pandemic prevention concept, but also infected the packing rooms and the packing materials every day. The TaiwanICDF places much efforts in providing cultivation materials to local farmers, consulting farmers' organization, building cold chain transportation, and broadening sales market, not only reduce farmers' production costs, but aims to reach a win-win situation between farmers' production and the market demanding without being affected by the pandemic blockade. Next, please. Next. In addition to strengthening supply chain, access to financial is critical to SMEs. The TaiwanICDF has been collaborating on the Women's Livelihood Bond with like-minded organizations and enterprises such as the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation and the Impact Investment Exchange, with DFC's provision of a 50% guarantee for underlying portfolio of the WB series. TaiwanICDF provided a $3 million subordinate loan to support the issuance of WB3 to attract additional investors. We are honored that Mr. Kribia, the Chief Investment Officer of IX, will give you more details later. Next, please. Although building a supportive environment for SME is important, there are always unforeseen challenges such as COVID-19. Learning from this pandemic, TaiwanICDF has continued extending humanitarian assistance projects with multiple NGOs to respond rapidly to the needs of SME. Since last year, we have cooperated with Harris Omes Foundation, TDH, in digital health innovation for COVID-19 response in India. We provided $200,000 and consulted on the app design. With support from Taiwanese hospital, the healthcare workers have benefited from utilizing the training and monitoring tool for COVID-19 response, the chatbot application in WhatsApp, and the digitalized screen and the triage tool for tracing and managing suspected COVID-19 cases. Through this cooperation, the number of direct and indirect beneficiaries, including healthcare workers and the general public, are expected to reach around 400,000 people. Next, please. In conclusion, with our strategy and the practice, TaiwanICDF will continue catalyzing SMEs development beyond COVID-19, and we will first expanding inclusiveness by linking to like-minded partners, expanding networks with public-private people partnership, and focusing on underserved communities and leaving no one behind. Second, enhance impacts by adopting innovation, responding to uncertainty with flexibility, producing spillover effects, and sharing best practice and lessons learned with global partners. Then create a win-win partnership by introducing a profitable business model to SMEs, encouraging investment from private sector, and building a sustainable environment for both beneficiaries and the investors. I hope my presentation has given you a good overview. Needless to say, the contribution from one organization alone might not be enough. However, through this webinar and the further collaboration with like-minded partners like you, I believe we can jointly help SME recover beyond the COVID-19 pandemic and get back on track toward the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Thank you very much.
If I may very quickly summarize what you said. You trust on the strengthening of cooperation in agriculture, education, public health, and information technology. You gave some very interesting statistics. You said that you have 96 ongoing projects in 37 countries and 22 technical missions, which is very laudable. You're certainly doing a lot of good work in this area. Very quickly, if I may just summarize what you said, the role and strategy of the TaiwanICDF has been to build capacity for better resilience, provide sustainable financing support, and support accountable emergency response. And the training aspect of it you have indicated is through promoting digital transformation, adopting innovative applications through crowdfunding, for example, and increasing production. And you have also been engaged in supporting the environment by strengthening value chain, which is win-win for farmers and consumers. And more importantly, you talked about the increasing access to financial services for women through the Women Livelihood Bond with IIX. And in terms of rapid response, you have facilitated resilience to unknown challenges caused by COVID-19 pandemic, and this is in the field of humanitarian assistance. And with specific reference to SMEs, you have addressed how you have been able to expand inclusiveness, enhance impacts, and create win-win partnerships. I'm sure that many of the participants today will look forward to working with you. Thank you very much. Your presentation has also been an eye-opener for me because you have indicated a lot of areas that I was not aware of. Thank you very much. We need to move on quickly, and our next speaker is Mr. Robert Crayville, and he's going to talk about how microfinance institutions provide solutions. Robert, the floor is yours. I think you're unmuted, Robert. You have to unmute yourself. Can't hear you.
Apologies. Thank you, Mr. Abraham, for your kind introduction and for alerting me to that. And thank you to TaiwanICDF for hosting this side event and this panel discussion. I'm excited to have the opportunity to share about Impact Investment Exchange, or IIX, as we refer to it, and how we have been partnering with TaiwanICDF, the U.S. government, and others to innovate solutions for SMEs and microfinance institutions in Asia. Next slide, please. Firstly, I'll just say a brief word about IIX. We are celebrating our 12th anniversary this year. We were founded by our CEO, Professor Adrian Chenaz, during the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, with a mission to create a more resilient and inclusive financial market that works for everyone, especially the less privileged. We focus particularly on climate action, women's empowerment, and resilient community development in less developed countries. Over the years, to achieve our mission, we've developed a number of financial innovations, including our Impact Partners platform, which is the first and largest crowdfunding platform for high-impact SMEs, and the Women's Livelihood Bond Series, which are the first gender lens impact investment instruments to be listed on a stock exchange. In the past 12 years, our work has unlocked over $215 million to support organizations that are addressing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. As you can see from the slide, we offer blended finance solutions to help high-impact SMEs access impact investment capital across their life cycle, from seed stage to maturity. Today, I will focus on one of these solutions in particular, our landmark Women's Livelihood Bond Series. Next slide, please. At IAX, we are, innovation is a key part of our DNA in order to achieve our goals. And beginning in 2017, IAX created an innovative impact investment instrument, the Women's Livelihood Bond Series, in order to channel capital to high-impact enterprises that advance sustainable livelihoods for women, while offering investors an attractive risk-return impact proposition. The U.S. $150 million Women's Livelihood Bond Series has brought together a range of public and private sector partners that we work with in support of these goals. In particular, as Mr. Shi mentioned in his presentation, we've been honored to have the support from two public sector partners whose support has helped to reduce risk for the bonds and attract private sector investors into these instruments. The U.S. government, through its Development Credit Authority, has provided a partial guarantee of the loans that we make to high-impact enterprises and microfinance institutions. And TaiwanICDF has provided first loss capital to the Women's Livelihood Bond Series as the anchor investor in IAX's Women's Catalyst Fund. The IAX Women's Catalyst Fund is an innovative gender lens investment vehicle that provides catalytic capital to scale gender lens investing by encouraging investment from new private sector investors. The Women's Livelihood Bond Series has received numerous awards, as you can see on the slide, for supporting financial inclusion, driving climate action, and improving gender equality, including the 2019 UN Global Climate Action Award. Next slide, please. Since the launch of the Women's Livelihood Bond 1 in 2017, IAX has structured and sold 3 bonds in the Women's Livelihood Bond Series, raising nearly $50 million, which we have used to make loans to high-impact SMEs and microfinance institutions whose work supports sustainable livelihoods for women. These loans have been made to SMEs and MFIs in a number of developing countries in South and Southeast Asia in a range of high-impact sectors. So these include microfinance, which has dominated, has been the majority of the portfolio, but they also include sustainable agricultural organizations, organizations providing access to clean energy, and many other high-impact sectors. The loans that we provide to these high-impact SMEs and microfinance institutions through the Women's Livelihood Bond Series allow them to scale their operations and increase the positive impact they create for women and the environment. So, for instance, the funding that we provide to microfinance institutions allows them to increase their loan portfolios, to provide more loans to small entrepreneurs, and to allow them to grow their businesses despite the challenges of the pandemic. Next slide, please. I'll speak briefly about how we have been able to support SMEs and microfinance institutions throughout the pandemic. So, as I mentioned, the first Women's Livelihood Bond was sold in 2017. I should say we've reached a landmark just earlier this week when that bond was fully redeemed at its 4-year maturity. showing that we could not only raise capital from private sector investors with the support of our public sector funders, but also invest that capital, use it to grow SMEs and microfinance institutions, and then ultimately return that capital to investors. So that was quite a landmark for us. But what I want to focus on here is that the second and third women's livelihood bonds were really launched during the pandemic. So the second women's livelihood bond was launched in January 2020, just before the COVID-19 crisis hit everybody's radar screen and impacted our lives so severely. We dispersed the funding from that bond to SMEs and microfinance institutions just as COVID-19 was reaching pandemic status. And then we didn't stop there. We structured and raised the third women's livelihood bond in December 2020 with support from TaiwanICDF and the US government, really in the midst of the pandemic. We've been very gratified that each of the SMEs which we've supported through the Women's Livelihood Bond have remained resilient despite the pandemic and are managing to cope with the pandemic and support their own clients through the pandemic. We believe that a key factor in this success has been that the SMEs we fund serve real community needs across their value chains. As markets have become fragmented worldwide and countries have turned inward during the COVID crisis, the Women's Livelihood Bonds borrowers have been at the forefront of building resilience in their communities. As you see on the slide, one example of a microfinance institution that we have supported throughout the COVID-19 crisis. Komida is an Indonesian cooperative offering microfinance loans to women entrepreneurs to start micro enterprises. We provided funding to Komida at the beginning of the COVID crisis through the WLB2, and then again as the crisis deepened through the Women's Livelihood Bond 3. This support helped Komida to continue to serve its clients throughout the crisis. In fact, Komida even exceeded its target of women entrepreneurs that it supported in 2020. You see here on the slide an example of one of Komida's clients and the impact that our funding has had on her livelihoods. All in all, the SMEs supported by the Women's Livelihood Bond Series have been an active part of the solution in responding to the COVID-19 crisis and are critical to helping their communities thrive during the pandemic and beyond. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide in the presentation. I'll just say that from the original issuance of the Women's Livelihood Bond 1 in 2017, the Women's Livelihood Bond Series has grown in scale and size with each year. And IX continues to work to scale the series further and to bring its benefits to developing countries across the world with the support of our partners. The US $150 million Women's Livelihood Bond Series will ultimately empower 3 million underserved women across the globe. This year in particular, in 2021, IX plans to scale the Women's Catalyst Fund to support the issuance of our fourth Women's Livelihood Bond, the $50 million WLB for Climate, covering both Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Looking forward, we plan to expand the WLB series to other emerging markets, including to Latin America in 2022. And with that, I thank you, those of our partners who are on this call, again, for your support in the past. And we invite new partners to work with us in partnership in the future. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for the presentation. We're running a little short of time. If I may just quickly summarize what Robert has said. I think the most important part is about the Women's Livelihood Bond Series, which is described as WLB series. Multi-country, multi-sector bond with a view to diversify risk and increase breadth of impact across the portfolio. And the underlying borrowers operate in a wide range of sectors, as we have seen from the slides that he has presented. And this involves allowing them to operate in a wide range with microfinance sector dominating the portfolio in all three issuances of the WLB. So how does it support SMEs and the MFIs? He explained how improved income generation ability is provided by these loans, improved financial resilience, and improved productivity. And if we look at the WLB series, it has mobilized 48 million to empower 500,000 women and girls. And I think the emphasis is on the women's empowerment and support to scale up Women's Catalyst Fund and to issue a 50 million WLB4 covering both Asia as well as Sub-Saharan Africa, which we will see this year, and to expand to other emerging markets. I think when we have question and answer time, if time allows, we can go into more detail. Thank you very much, Robert. I would now move on to our last speaker, and I have to apologize to Ms. Rich because we have overshot the time that was supposed to be hers. But in any case, she said she has to leave for another meeting, so we will let her make a presentation and hope that this presentation would address all the key issues about navigating the new normal and how chambers make a difference. Jyoti, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be amidst the very distinguished panel out here, which did give a lot of dimensions on the support being provided to MSME across the region. And this is this is a great learning experience for me by being here. We've talked about, the significance of the MSMEs across geographies, and it's no different for India. In India as well, according to the MSME data, we have about 100,000 MSMEs employing about 11,000 people in the 11,000. This is 1,109 lakh people, which is nearly about 110 million people in the MSME sector, and the GDP contribution is about 30%, and that to exports is about 50%. So that really shows the significance of the sector. Next slide, please. So during the pandemic, of course, there's been a lot of upheaval in the sector. CACCI does a quarterly business confidence survey to really gauge the business sentiment, and we did see the business sentiment drop by 20 notches from a decadal high just a quarter before when the second phase of the COVID started in India. And since MSMEs constitute about 90% of the total enterprises, as I mentioned, a sharp decline in the confidence levels indicates that MSMEs really suffered hugely during the pandemic, and close to about 10% of MSMEs, mostly the micro units, are likely to be wiped out as a result of the economic shocks emerging from the pandemic-induced restrictions, as well as the increased household expenditure. A majority of these MSMEs, they came under severe financial stress and required immediate working capital support to sustain themselves from the pandemic crisis. And there was supply chain disruption, labor disruption, demand issues arising, excess capacities. These are some of the operational challenges which were being faced, and MSMEs contributing about 30% of the overall GDP. The consequential loss in GDP from COVID-related disruptions is estimated to somewhere around 0.25 to 0.5%. And with this, with a multiplier effect of over 5 times, loss on employment is expected to be immense out here. And according to one of our statistical agencies called CMI, in May 2021, employment estimates showed that about 23 million jobs were lost in the months of April and May, and most of these were in the MSME space. Of course, the contact-based industries like construction, manufacturing, hotels, etc., did take a lot of beating. There is, of course, a need for an immediate support for MSMEs, not only from the government, but also from the business ecosystem that the MSMEs could not only survive, but also revive and thrive, and which requires access to easy finance, a demand to kind of revert for MSMEs to really be able to survive and revive and thrive going forward. We also require to enter the global business ecosystem. International exposure is very critical in order to give impetus to diversify and improve their overall business in terms of quality and standards, international compliances, etc. And the bigger aspect also is to consider how this revival and growth will become greener and sustainable, because the COVID pandemic has actually, because of this, the MSMEs have taken a hit, and the priorities which were there earlier, the priorities are now changing. So this is an area where we need to really focus a lot and see how do we bring the attention back to this. So next slide, please. This is where, in this background, how the industry associations have played and can play a role going forward is something which I'm going to talk about in this slide. As you know, the Chambers of Commerce are essentially a network of businesses, and this network is made of individuals who do invest their time and money into the organization, generally with the goal of the development of the country's overall economic well-being. And besides providing network opportunities for the members and industry at large, we do closely work with the government for resolving several issues on ease of doing business aspects, and act as a bridge to develop transparency between government and industries, and bring about more growth-oriented policies deriving from experiences and ground level realities being faced by the industry. Some of the factors for the relevance of industry chamber are, how can we use the industry influence on both the industry itself as well as on the government in order to kind of come out with the policies and the support system which is for the larger good of the industry and the economy as a whole, because the nation's welfare and nation's good is the primary focus and primary job that the chambers really keep in mind. Of course, we need to continuously guide, the industries in order to overcome the challenges that are being faced, and we do try to do that through a network of industry experts who are associated with us across the spectrum of the issues being faced by, the MSMEs, whether it is, in terms of finance or taxation or economic policies, marketing, etc. So that's really what we try to do to guide them. Of course, provide them a lot of networking opportunities through the whole large network that business chambers have. Handhold them in terms of, providing knowledge and information in form of our research papers, white papers, etc. And it is timely knowledge and information, which is what we really focus on. And the industry chambers do have an immense amount of global network, a very vast global network. So how we can really utilize this global network, through the international delegations, incoming and outgoing, for creating new business avenues, getting more information on how the global businesses are moving, how we can connect our businesses, the small businesses, with them. And, chambers also make it convenient for industries to participate in various international exhibitions and fairs to showcase their products. We quickly, during the COVID time, moved to the, to do the virtual events and the virtual exhibitions. And we did provide a lot of opportunity to our members to kind of continue doing the businesses in whatever way they can, even in these difficult times. The affiliation with the chambers also help the industry units, to come up, be connected with the other stakeholders and, learn from each other, which is also very beneficial for their business growth. Next slide, please. So to just talk about, some of the key FICCI initiatives that we took, during the pandemic time. It's also apart from, of course, helping them in their own businesses, so that they don't take as much as a hit as they have taken, or if they have taken hit, how we can support them. We also had a COVID management task force, which really looked at the whole supply issues on the medical side, because as you know, there were a lot of issues that arose because the second phase that we saw actually had a lot of the numbers were way higher than the medical system could really absorb. So we really quickly gathered the momentum, and along with our members, we helped in arranging anything which was right from ranging from concentrators to cylinders to also helping people get the right kind of drugs and medicines. We also put together a lot of CSR funds and other contributions in order to kind of meet a lot of needs around the COVID management in the country. And MSMEs did support a lot, and what MSMEs really required is pooling of resources, and precisely the role we played in this effort. We did several webinars, etc., and these are all virtual webinars because physical events obviously can't happen. So FICCI and the FICCI's allied body, which is the Confederation of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, it adopted relevant technologies very swiftly and organized huge number of webinars covering multiple topics, including, funding, technology, soft skills, life skills, management, policies and schemes, and many more. And FICCI CMSME, as I mentioned, also organized multiple online sessions to bring government and MSMEs together on the same platform so that MSMEs in these difficult times could interact with the government officials, which created a sense of belief amongst MSMEs that they will be waded through, this difficult time with the support of, the right direction being provided by the government. We, of course, provided the right kind of information and timely information. We worked rigorously towards spreading the right and valuable information amongst MSMEs through mailers, through webinars. And during the second wave, when different, state governments were imposing lockdowns, and there are some which are still under lockdown, it is very important to be able to provide information on time to the industries in order to kind of reduce, as many problems or as many, issues that they may be facing on the ground. And we really facilitated a lot of dialogue with the state government to ensure that, the supplies remain smooth and the operations really go on unhindered on the ground. We worked very closely with the government, both at the center and at the state level, to provide the ground level feedback and issues of the industry, and played a major role in forming schemes and amending schemes, various policies, and ensuring that all of this happens well in time. And as and when, so there were several guarantee-related schemes which were brought in, and these required certain change in direction and focus to become more effective. We continuously worked with the government by providing feedback to them on what could really be benefit, and happy to say that government did take many of our suggestions, and the ECLGS scheme, which was one of the largest schemes introduced around this time, did undergo a lot of changes as and when we provided them the feedback, whether it was in terms of disseminating information or sanctioning the right kind of guaranteed loans, or whether it was in terms of adding more industries to it or changing the definitions, etc. All of that is what we really work towards, and happy to say that it did have an impact on the ground. Of course, in terms of assisting the MSMEs, we've through our offices across the country, we've assisted the units in resolving their issues, which they were facing on a day-to-day basis, whether it is in terms of COVID compliances, necessary permissions, including the transfer of essential goods, etc. We've also helped in pooling the resources. I talked about it earlier as well. Collecting the masks, PPE, sanitizers, also helping the labor on the ground, providing all kinds of medical support, etc. So this pooling really helped MSMEs also make a contribution, to this towards this effort. We also had a helpline for the industries where units could actually come to us and raise issues and try and seek solutions. And we did provide support wherever we could, and wherever it was needed, we did take it to the government for helping the industries really, take care of their concerns. Virtual exhibitions I've already talked about, and many of these were organized during these difficult times to really be able to handhold the MSMEs. As far as the policy advocacy is concerned, we did put forth a series of recommendations to the government, which are extremely important for the MSME sector to not just emerge from the current crisis, but also thrive going forward, as I mentioned earlier as well. The required immediate support in the form of easier access to collateral-free working capital loans, moratorium on loan repayments, faster disbursement of pending payments and benefits to MSMEs, which includes input tax refunds and MEIS and SEIS benefits as well, supporting the provident fund payments to the MSME employees. These are just a few of them which we worked upon and were accepted by the government. A majority of these, were announced by the government over the course of the pandemic year, last year and even this year. Many of these have been introduced and amended as per the requirement of the industry. And the recent measures announced by the Finance Minister on June 28th not only extended but also expanded the ongoing support to the MSMEs, especially in the areas of providing collateral-free loans. Next slide, please. So taking the responsibility for creating opportunities for MSMEs in the changing environment is something which we are very, very conscious of. And some of the aspects out there are, being able to really provide business intelligence, which plays a key role in capturing the market, as SMEs would not be in a best position to access or comprehend business intelligence and analytics. It is industry association like ours which could perform this task for the MSMEs, and access to business intelligence in an easier way would really create opportunities for SMEs in the global, in reaching out to the global businesses, providing new market access, which is very important. It not only helps in increasing profitability, but it is also important to avoid the situation, something like lack of demand in a saturated market. So how do we really look at new opportunities outside those saturated markets? And through our access, we do provide, the information to the concerned MSME so that they can understand the market opportunities, and we do facilitate access also to these markets to our member companies. Relevant networking is something I did talk about, and that is something which we are really experts at. And a whole range of networking, whether it is with the overseas businesses or the industry or with the government, or networking within own businesses, all of that is something. Those range of activities are being done at a much greater pace, in these times than has ever been done in the past. Coming to the affordable technologies, technology probably was seen as an enabler for businesses to be more competitive. But today in the COVID times, the technology is something which is required, which has really become a necessity and not just an enabler for competitive edge. And due to lockdown, many technologies have emerged to support businesses for smooth functioning, which has become which is necessary for them to really perform their businesses on a day-to-day basis. Employees working from home, production being managed remotely, automated accounting softwares, these are all enablers for businesses to work without any major interruptions. And larger corporations do have the resource to be able to have access to these technologies, which small businesses definitely find it difficult. So in coming times, some of these technologies and software may become mandatory, from the regulatory perspective also. So in India, for example, accounting software with a facility for tracking each transaction would become mandatory in coming time. So such requirements would add an extra burden for SMEs, and industry chambers like ours, with the support from interested stakeholders, can actually create a pool of technologies for SMEs at an affordable cost. And this is some of the endeavors that we are working on. I've already talked about, the need for constant flow of relevant information and the role that we have played in this. Addressing regulatory bottlenecks, of course, by understanding the ground level in ground level issues, and connecting with the government on time, and ensuring that the policies are carved out which is not only for the good of the industry, but for the larger welfare of the nation. So the MSMEs, which are backbone of the economy, continue to kind of, work unhindered. They remain in the business. They continue to, support the growth of the economy. So that's really our endeavor with which we work. And these are some of the areas through which we can provide support. And just to kind of reiterate in conclusion, chambers are the key stakeholders of business ecosystem, and pandemic has made them even more relevant and important in our view. Having said that, changing dynamics of the global business arena would also impact the functioning of the Indian industry chambers itself. So it will require them to become more proactive, open to change, and working towards inclusive development. And as SMEs lack resources, chambers would have to play the role of mentors and handholders for them. And we are extremely conscious of this and making every endeavor to kind of, reorient ourselves to make sure that we remain relevant and continue to support our, small industry members as well. Thank you once again for this opportunity. Over to you.
Thank you, Jyoti. That was indeed a tremendous explanation of the role that Chambers of Commerce play. And I think you've addressed it very effectively, because you not only touched on the role that larger companies play, but also how they can impact on the smaller businesses. If I may try and summarize very quickly what you have said, you talked about the roadmap for the future, where survival depends on support from the government and the private sector. To revive the business, you talked about a conducive environment and the ease of finance and sustainable demand. And to thrive, the new business avenues, global tie-ups, and improvement in quality and standards, which is what the Chamber is trying to do for its members and the MSMEs that they come into contact with. FICCI initiatives, you described quite effectively the COVID management, virtual exhibitions and webinars, spreading the right information, the importance of information in these critical times, working closely with the government, more importantly, hand-holding the MSMEs, which requires a great deal of tact and ability, aggregation of manufacturers so that they can work as a group, and COVID helpline. And you also touched on the detailed activities that provide opportunities for SMEs, MSMEs, especially through business intelligence, new market access, relevant networking, an open pool of affordable technologies, a constant flow of relevant information, and addressing regulatory bottlenecks. I think what FICCI is doing is laudable, and I'm sure many people have learned how the Chambers of Commerce can play an effective role in dealing with the massive problems that the pandemic has caused to all sorts of businesses, including largely the MSMEs. Thank you very much, speakers. I hope we have a little time for question and answer session. I saw 3 questions come up. The first was for Alex. I saw one for Mr. Suri and also for Robert. So can I ask the people behind the scene to project the question for Alex, please? I saw a question come up. Can you please put that on the screen so that the others can also see what the question is? Sorry, Alex, I'm sorry, I saw a question come up in the corner, but I was concentrating on the presentation, and so I didn't have a chance to take it down. But yes. If you saw the question, Alex, can you please answer that question that was raised? Maybe you want to say the question before.
Thank you, George. I have saw the questions regarding the crowdfunding.
Yes, yes.
I will a little bit explain about the crowdfunding, which Icdf had been operated last year. And last year in 2020, it's the first time Icdf incorporated our operations with crowdfunding platform to implement 2 projects. And one project is for donation of fabric masks for the vocational training schools in the Kingdom of Eswatini. And we try to donate the masks for vocational training schools, teachers, and students, and to provide it through the mask. I think can provide them with better protect when they go to school. And the second case is a coffee grower, and this project is through cooperation with Taiwan's local coffee grower social enterprises, and we assist Guatemala female entrepreneurs and small-scale coffee growers to help them export their coffee to Taiwan. And we try to use the very good skills and cooperate with Taiwanese local, one of the local social enterprises which involved in specialty grow coffees. And all these two projects prove that crowdfunding could be an efficient way for aid project, not only in Taiwan, but also across the border to some other developing countries. And these two projects, according to our statistics, we have accumulated 500 different social enterprises and institutions, as well as individuals, to donate their funding for our project. And we accumulate through partnership between public, private people to be a very efficient way to implement international official development assistance project. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, there was one more question, which is a minor question. Can you just put that up again? Basically, the question was, what is the major difference between the role of ODA and national government? Difference between ODA and national government.
Wow, it's a very interesting question. The ODA means Official Development Aid, which means one country provided concessional soft financing or technical assistance to another countries in order to improve the assisted country's social and economic development and the welfare of their people. And the differentiation between the ODA and the government budget is government budget in general is used to domestic expenditures for different kind of purpose. However, ODA is cross-border, generally from developing country, and provide assistance to developing countries.
Right, thank you. And I think you have explained it in your presentation also, the work that you're doing under ODA. I have a question for Suri. Suri, the question for you is, many countries in Asia and Pacific are suffering from the pandemic caused by the variants of virus. What is the major challenge for policymakers in the region to see an orderly growth after the pandemic? And is there any innovative regional solution so far to this challenge? Are you there?
Yeah, no, I'm very much there. And thanks for that question. I think it's a great question. First of all, I think we need to get the pandemic to be an end and look at it as an endemic. And for that, vaccination is the key. So when I see targets for vaccination that run into middle of next year, that worries me, because I think that's the first thing that we need to emphasize to everyone, that vaccination is going to be the key. There are going to be variations of the virus. We already know of Lambda, which is emerging from Latin America. But once vaccination is done, and there are simple things of vaccinate, trace, and isolate, we're going to find that we will be able to have some kind of resumption of normal activity. Now, this virus has already shown that there are some winners and losers. We know who the losers are: airlines, tourism, hotels, sport, MICE activities for a number of countries like Singapore, Hong Kong. and retail. But there have also been winners. There have been winners in terms of media, technology, streaming, Zoom.
Are you there? Hello?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
So going forward, I think what countries need to do is to see how they can build corridors for people to travel safely and expand activities. It will take a while. It's not going to be easy. In my view, what we have seen is cyclical, not structural, but we are going to see some changes take place in terms of will people go to work or will they prefer to work from home? Maybe you're going to see more of a hybrid model going forward, and that has huge implications for real estate, retail, and so on. But yes, it's time for people to cooperate more. I think governments in the region need to cooperate more. I think the private and public sector needs to cooperate more. And I think there is a great deal of work for industry associations and chambers of commerce. I'm done. I didn't have anything more to add.
Sir Abraham, you seem to be muted.
Maybe while we wait for Mr. Abraham to be unmuted, I think there was a third question which was for Mr. Robert.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kapalia. I did see a question which had to do with basically that while COVID-19 has created severe impacts on vulnerable groups like women entrepreneurs, the question was, as a financial institution, how does IIX think about COVID-19 and its effect on SME development, and how have we changed our strategy, or will we change our strategy in the new era? And what I'll say to that is two things. First of all, COVID-19 did clearly show that SMEs are crucial for the economic health of developing economies, and really of all economies. And it also showed that access to financing was critical to help those SMEs as well as other businesses to kind of survive and get beyond short-term disruptions to their activities. And I think it also showed that microfinance institutions played a critical role in continuing to provide support to the micro entrepreneurs who are their clients throughout the crisis. So we were very pleased to see that the microfinance institutions that we supported all continued to provide capital to support their clients throughout the crisis. And so as we approach the Women's Livelihood Bond 3, which we structured right during the midst of the pandemic, we consciously did two things in reaction to the pandemic. First of all, we said we're not going to pull back. In fact, we're going to step forward and try to provide financing to strong SMEs and microfinance institutions to make sure they were able to come through the crisis and continue to support their clients and other stakeholders. And the second thing we did is we really analyzed and looked at and consciously supported those companies that we saw could be resilient through the crisis and could also be responsive to the crisis and provide real solutions to the communities they work in. And so we were able to target our lending to certain sectors and certain companies where we thought it could do the most good for their communities throughout the crisis. So thank you. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. Well, one of the fallouts from this whole pandemic is that some of the MSMEs have suffered because they have acted as subcontractors to the large companies, and the large companies don't pay them, and so they have a problem, which is a very big problem. And unless they get support at the financial level from institutions like yours, if they are a viable business, then there's no way for them to go except to go down. And this is one of the major problems that a lot of these small businesses are facing. In countries like Japan and Korea, they have actually legislation that makes it compulsory for large companies to pay the smaller companies first. But that again is something which is of a different nature, and not all the countries have got such rules and laws. But there has to be a certain level of protection by the government agencies for these subcontracting companies that are affected by non-payment by the larger companies. Of course, everybody is affected by the pandemic, but the smaller ones more so. Are there any other questions? Well, if there are no more questions, we've actually overshot on our time. But I want to take this opportunity to thank the organizers, not only CACCI, the Confederation of Asia Pacific Chambers of Commerce and Industry, but also Icdf and all the speakers who have taken the time and the trouble to participate and actively contribute to this discussion. I'm sure the details of the discussions will be made available to those who participated in this. I want to thank CACCI President, Mr. Samir Modi, for opening the conference and for providing this opportunity by working with Icdf. Thank you, gentlemen, and Lady Jyoti, she had to leave for a meeting, but we hope that it has been a wonderful experience for all those of you who participated. And thank you again to all the speakers. Thank you. Have a pleasant evening.